Good afternoon, I'm Rob Boskamp, and you're listening to South Texas Midday. It is Tuesday, November 11th, and Veterans Day. Thank you for joining us, and on behalf of all of us here at KEDT and KVRT FM, to the men and women who have served, we thank you for your service and for our freedoms. Corpus Christi City Council meets today at City Hall. In this week's regularly scheduled meeting, council members will hear an update on water supply projects. Interim COO of Corpus Christi Water, Nicholas Winkleman, recently presented scenarios on how additional water supplies could delay Corpus Christi's potential Level 1 water emergency next year. Winkleman also issued a memo to City Manager Peter Zanoni last week with updates on various water supply initiatives. Also happening last week, Mayor Paulette Guajardo said the Inner Harbor Desalination Plant project will soon be back on City Council's radar. Zanoni also presented Council last week with a no-cost to the city plan to get the suspended project back in motion. As of today, Lake Corpus Christi is currently at 12.3% capacity. Choke Canyon Reservoir is at 10.4% capacity. You can check out more on these water projects at kedt.org or in yesterday's episode of South Texas Midday. But for now, we move on to other items on the agenda, including a second reading for an ordinance authorizing an amendment to a 30-year ground lease landfill gas and lease agreement with Corpus Christi Renewables LLC. That will be for payment to install and maintain the transmission pipeline from El Centro Landfill to Cefe Venezuela Landfill. The amendment mentions charging CCR a construction fee of the pipeline up to $1.2 million to set up an annual fee for operation of the pipeline and to allow CCR to utilize the Cefe Venezuela landfill gas facility to process gas from El Centro Landfill. Council will also discuss a motion authorizing a professional services contract with BRW Architects to provide design and bid phase services for the 17,000 square foot fire station number 9 on Leopard Street. The cost will be about $814,000. A separate motion will be for BRW Architect to provide design and bid phase services for fire station number 9 on Airline Road as well, in an amount not to exceed $623,000. Both contracts will be paid with fiscal year 2026 funding available from the GO Bond 2024 fund. City Council will also review a motion to authorize a professional services contract with Cotton Landreth Architects, Inc. of Corpus Christi to provide design, bid, and construction phase services for the OSO wastewater treatment plant office facility up to $391,000. The contract will be paid with fiscal year 2025 funding available from the Wastewater Capital Fund. Council members will also hear the first reading of an ordinance to amend the City Code of Ordinances to make changes to city boards, commissions, and committees. That includes discontinuing the Citizens Advisory Health Board, Commission on Children and Youth, the Flood Mitigation Hazard Information Committee, and the Human Relations Commission. Also on the topic, they will look at revising the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee to add an ex officio member appointed by the CEO of Visit Corpus Christi and add a statement of preferred representation from each council district. They will also look at revising the Sister City Committee to reflect transfer of the services to contractor United Corpus Christi Chamber. They will discuss revising the Transportation Advisory Commission as a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and will look at renaming the Water, Shore, and Beach Advisory Committee to the Water, Shore, and Beach Advisory Committee. Public comment session signups are available online at corpuschristitx.gov. In state news, Texas plans to cut Medicaid rates for dozens of medical supply services like ventilators, feeding tubes, and mobility aids. KERA's Abigail Ruman reports providers from across the state spent hours Monday urging the state to reconsider.
Medical supply providers say the reimbursement rate cuts proposed by the Texas Health and Human Services Commission could limit what they can offer and may lead to closures. Stephen Vigorito's son uses a feeding tube. He says it feels like the state is trying to determine how little it can pay people providing critical services.
That's not necessarily a good public policy. And these are real people that are affected.
The service utilized by Vigorito's son is facing a 44% reimbursement rate decrease. Some rates could decrease by up to 85%. I'm Abigail Ruman in Dallas.
The food bank of the Rio Grande Valley received a $25,000 check yesterday from AIM Media Texas. The food bank services about 93,000 people weekly in an area that spans across Hidalgo, Cameron, and Willacy counties. Kirsten Vinson, president of the food bank RGV board of directors, told myrgv.com that for every dollar that the food bank receives, they are able to provide 5 meals. Monday's $25,000 donation will help account for 125,000 meals. AIM Media Charities is the charitable arm of AIM Media Texas, the parent company of the Monitor, Valley Morning Star, Brownsville Herald, and MyRGV.com. More than 11% of Texas's total population participates in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and during the longest recorded government shutdown of 40-plus days, food banks have had to accommodate in order to help provide food for individuals who rely on those benefits. Delayed benefits plus earlier cuts to federal government programs have hindered food banks, but local community members have stepped up to help meet the need. In addition to the loss of SNAP benefits, Vinson said that the government shutdown has brought more people to the food bank and partnering food pantries, including government employees who have not been paid since the shutdown began last month. And KEDT recently interviewed officials with food banks across the region. You can check out our interviews with Coastal Bend Food Bank's B. Hansen and Food Bank of the Golden Crescent's Robin Cadle on our website, KEDT.org, or on previous episodes of South Texas Midday, wherever you get your podcasts. Last week, Texas voters approved Proposition 14, the constitutional amendment that both establishes a Dementia Prevention and Research Institute of Texas and authorizes the spending of $3 billion to set up the fund. The institute will be funded with $3 billion in surplus state revenue after this first year. The institute will be funded with $3 billion in surplus state revenue after this first year. The institute will see up to $300 million appropriated each year. Diagnosing Alzheimer's disease is a difficult procedure, but the Food and Drug Administration recently approved a primary care blood test that may help simplify the process. In this week's episode of Vital Signs, KERA's Sam Baker talked about it with Dr. Brendan Kelly. He leads UT Southwestern Medical Center's clinical trials on dementia. He's also a professor and the school's clinical vice chair of neurology.
The blood tests that have recently been approved by the FDA can be very helpful in evaluating patients that are having cognitive decline or who are experiencing dementia, but they in and of themselves may not be sufficient to establish a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease.
So what's the real benefit of the test?
It's less invasive than other modalities that we might use to evaluate Alzheimer's disease, such as collecting spinal fluid. Now, if we were to consider using one of these new therapies that targets amyloid deposited in the brain, we would want to confirm that amyloid was in fact present using more advanced technology like a PET scan. A blood test can be very useful to determine where a PET scan may be indicated. In other words, if that blood test were negative, the likelihood that the PET scans would demonstrate significant levels of amyloid in the brain is relatively low. If the blood test were positive, that would confirm that it's very likely that that amyloid PET scan is going to be positive. So it can be used as a very powerful screening tool.
Do you seek a test like this when someone has had some type of confirmation of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, or does a person who maybe thinks, I've been getting a little forgetful lately, maybe I ought to go have this test and have a look-see?
If a person were cognitively normal, let's say that person does not have any cognitive symptoms or even any concerns about their memory at this time, and perhaps that person has a strong family history of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, we would recommend not to use this as a screening test, meaning if that person who was cognitively normal had an abnormal blood test, there's not any FDA-approved medication that would be indicated to try to address that. The situation changes if a person is having memory concerns or is having, let's say, for example, they or their family members are expressing some concerns about forgetfulness, and perhaps they bring these up with their physician who does some cognitive testing, and perhaps they find some mild cognitive difficulties. In that person, a blood test like this could be a very powerful tool to figure out whether those mild cognitive symptoms could represent early signs of Alzheimer's disease.
I've done interviews with people off and on about dementia and Alzheimer's. Most of those always about, we've still got lots of questions trying to figure out what this disease is, how do we proceed with it. But somehow it seems in recent years we've made enormous strides with it.
That's absolutely accurate. If you were to look at Alzheimer's research, from the bird's eye view of it, you would find two major thrusts of research. One is the development of more accurate biomarkers or ways to detect the disease and refining these biomarkers so that they could detect the disease at the earliest possible stage. The other important thrust has really been in refining our biochemical and biological understanding of the disease and developing new therapies or new treatments interventions that can target the pathology of Alzheimer's disease and hopefully slow or even stop it altogether. And so in the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen the FDA approve the first new medications to treat Alzheimer's disease in over 20 years. So that's very exciting in the field.
Dr. Brendan Kelly is professor and clinical vice chair of neurology at UT Southwestern Medical Center. And Corpus Christi Animal Care Services will have free adoptions for cats and dogs through the end of this month. The decision to waiver all adoption fees come as the shelter has reached full capacity. Residents can visit the shelter at 2626 Holly Road Monday through Saturday from noon to 5:30 p.m. or browse adoptable pets online at the service's website. All adopted pets will be spayed or neutered and receive age-appropriate vaccinations, including for rabies if needed, flea and tick prevention, and microchipping. And a reminder to potential pet owners, it is a big responsibility. And before making that decision to offer a furry friend a forever home, please consider any limits with your time and resources, and that ultimately is for their benefit. And that is the latest news and information on South Texas Midday. I'm Rob Boskamp. Your community arts calendar and more is on the way.